It is June 24th, and this is day 176 of Bible 365. So guys, welcome. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and we are reading through the Bible in 365 days, 1 year, using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan from oneyearbibleonline.com. So go on that site, download their free reading plan, and then jump in and join me and start reading. So if you have never been with me, guys, and you want to stick with me, I'd love for you to listen, but then I want you to go back to the beginning and start from Genesis 1 and then read all the way through so you can build your foundation. If you have been with me before, our reading today is Isaiah 8 through 11:6. So guys, this is, for me, this was a tough one because it is prophecy, and it's hard kind of to read through all of this prophecy and understand what it is that he's saying and try and put myself in the position of the Israelite versus putting myself today, here and now, or not maybe verses, but also putting myself today, here and now, and kind of trying to understand what all of it means. So my little bit of background is that we are in the time of the kings of Israel. This is in the neighborhood of, I think, like maybe 800 years before Christ was born. And so we are there. The kingdoms have been split. Northern kingdom is Israel. Southern kingdom is Judah. For those who say I talk with my hands, I can't help myself. Northern kingdom is Israel. Southern kingdom is Judah. We have kings up in the northern kingdom of Israel. We have kings that are mostly good down in the southern kingdom of Judah, mostly bad up in the kingdom of Israel. But the reality is at this time there are two kings that are leading. They are both away from God. Neither one of them is following the Lord. They're doing evil in the sight of God. God has picked and chosen these people to be his representatives on earth, to show the rest of the world who God is, and they are all turning and following other gods. They're just doing whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, and then they're going to the Lord when they need help. So he's had enough. He needs to allow things to sort of crumble, and then he's going to bring them back. And how do we know that? Because he sends prophets to tell them that. So Isaiah was a recorder for King Ahaz. And so by recorder, like he would be with him and he would write like of his deeds and things like that. He is also a prophet, which means the Lord is speaking to him, right? So in this, I think prophecy has a lot of definitions, or maybe it's a more fluid definition. It defines itself in a few different ways. But in this way, God is speaking directly to Isaiah, and then Isaiah is giving these messages to whatever king is in charge of the land at that time. Prophets are usually not really well loved. I feel like in some ways they're like tax collectors, right? Like your accountant is never your favorite person because usually they're telling you got to pay more money. So you don't look forward to going to your accountant, but you know that there's truth in the accountant and you know that they need to be there. So, and they help you actually to stay in line in the way that you should be staying in line. And so in some ways, this is Isaiah's job. So we saw in the first chapter in Isaiah a couple of days ago that Isaiah sees what the heavenly world looks like, right? Like he gets a peek into what the heavens look like. He sees this being with a robe. He sees these seraphim with some wings and some covering of their eyes, and they're shouting, holy, 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 right? So like this is this immensely amazing thing. He hears the Lord ask, who can I send to warn my people of all the destruction? And Isaiah's like, hey, right here, me, send me, send me. I love to share your word with people. And obviously these are horrible paraphrases, but this is essentially where we are. And so there's Israel, the kingdom of Israel is just falling apart. The kings are assassinating other kings to get in place to be king, and none of it is working out well. And so this is what Isaiah is going to share from the Lord. So the Lord is sharing this with his people. So we start today in chapter, I got to go back to the start, which is terrible. So it's June 24th. We are Isaiah 8. It says, the Lord said to me, take a large scroll and write on it with an ordinary pen, Maher Shalal Hashbaz, which I'm sorry, my pronunciation is probably awful. So I called in Uriah the priest and Zechariah, son of Jebediah, as reliable witnesses for me. Then I made love to the prophetess, which I wanted just to note that I thought this was really interesting that she was both his wife, which I assume because he made love to her, so it's his wife. He produces a child with her, and she is also a prophet. So he is a prophet and she is a prophet. It doesn't necessarily mean she's a prophet. I'm not going to even say necessarily. It doesn't say she's a prophet by marriage, right? She is a prophet in and of her own right. And again, it's because they call her that. They give her that heading. It doesn't say the wife of a prophet, right? So she's also a prophet in that in the temple. And she conceived and gave birth to a son, and then the Lord tells him to name him that. And the meaning of that name, I wrote it down, because it's an interesting meaning. It says, swift is booty, speedy is prey. That's what the name is that he has given them. And a couple of these things are depending on your version. Like I read a version last night that they reversed it, that they said swift is booty, and then they gave his name right. So depending on your version, they tell you what this means. Swift is booty, and then so that's what he names his son. Okay, and then it says, because the boy knows how to say before the boy knows how to say my father and my mother, the wealth of Damascus and plunder of Samaria will be carried off by the king of Assyria. So he gives them this, and then he says he's going to be born, right? Swift is booty. He's going to be born, and then within within a year, things are going to start to fall apart. We're going to see that Israel is going to start to fall apart. Damascus and Samaria are going to be carried off by the king of Assyria. And this is what he says. So the Lord spoke to me again, and he says, because the people have rejected the gently flowing waters, so because they have rejected me, I'm going to send these major floods. And these major floods are going to flood all over Israel and sort of into Judah, right? So there's going to be mass amounts of destruction. It says, and then its outspread wings will cover the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God is with us. We've already heard Isaiah talk about Emmanuel, and there's a reason I'm pointing this out. Because then we go into verses 9 and 10, and it says, raise the war cry, you nations, and be shattered. Listen, all you distant lands. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Devise your strategy, but it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, but it will not stand. For God is with us. So I just want to, as quickly as possible, point a couple things out to you in this section. I had a lot of trouble with this section. I'm going to give you what I think it overall means, but I had a lot of trouble. So depending again on your version, because obviously we're translating this into English, and by we, I don't mean me in any way. People are translating this into English, and so they're using contextually what they read in the original Hebrew and Greek, and then they're translating that the best way possible into English. So there are versions that have quotes that begin in chapter 6, and then the quotes don't end until, verse 6, and they don't end until verse 10. My version actually doesn't look like that. They begin in verse 6, and they end in verse 8. So to me, it looks like there's a different person speaking, right? That first one, absolutely 100% the Lord. The second one, maybe Isaiah. So I'm saying this to you because I went and met with a couple of my girls that are also believers and that I trust, and we were having this conversation because I was stumbling with it, because the reason I'm stumbling and the reason it matters is because who is speaking and then who is the audience, right? Because it matters. And so if Isaiah is speaking, my issue was where it says, for God is with us, or because God is with us. So like, you can prepare for battle all day, but you're going to be destroyed because God is with us. Well, who's God with? Is God with the people who are getting destroyed? Are you the people that are going to destroy? Right? So I was really struggling with some of these things. And then in verse 6, it says, oh, Emmanuel, which is God is with us. So is it the same thing? And again, depending on your translation, it might say, God is with us, God is with us. It might say, Emmanuel, Emmanuel. Like, so obviously I'm not the only one that's struggling with this chain of verses, right? So this chain of verses maybe isn't the most clear to us in this time. So I just want to say, first of all, that right now I don't know for sure, right? I don't know. I'm making observations based on what I read. And then I don't want to go to somebody who thinks that they know and just get the answers. I really want to wrestle with it myself. And then that's why I ask people that I trust and that I care about and that I know love the Lord, because then we can all sort of work it out together. And it really helped to open my eyes in that the point really is that God is with the people of Israel and Judah. So no matter what happens, right? Like, so even if he's destroying them, right? Like, so what he's saying is prepare for battle, but you're still going to be destroyed, right? Like, gird up your loins, guys, but it's still coming, because he had warned them and warned them and warned them and warned them. But God is with them. So no matter what happens, even if they have destruction at this point, God is with them. Part of the destruction is the fact that God is with them. And for us, that is painful. What do you mean? You're going to destroy me, but then you're going to pretend that you love me? No, the love actually is the destruction, because he's destroying everything that is evil in Israel, and then he's going to bring back everyone that follows the Lord. And by bring back, I don't necessarily mean bring back to life, right? Like, there's going to be this destruction, but it is a lesson to Israel, right? It is for them to learn, to understand, for them to have, in some ways, in later chapter verses, it says a yoke put upon them by somebody stronger than them, that the Lord allowed them to put a yoke upon them. So then they cry out to the Lord. So then the Lord can come and save. So I hope that helps. I don't know if you guys struggle with that. You guys may have just read through it and said, hey, no big deal. But it was really a struggle for me, even when I can understand that he's saying prepare, right? So overwhelmingly, I think we disagreed. Is it Isaiah saying it, or is it God saying it? And some just said it's God because it's in poetry and not prose, where but I'm still not sure, and I'm going to let it go and be okay with that. So overwhelmingly, what we know is even though they're being destroyed, God is with them. And then so we kind of push down into more of this chapter. It says, this is what the Lord says to me, Isaiah, with his strong hand upon me, warning me not to follow the way of this people. So he's telling Isaiah, like, don't follow them. So don't call conspiracy everything this people calls conspiracy. So don't be like them. Isaiah, set yourself apart from these people. And we know if you follow Christ and you follow him to the best of your ability, you know how hard it is to not be a part of the world. It's difficult in so many ways. You feel like you can be judged. You don't fit in, right? You're not doing the things that the world is doing, and therefore they're not accepting you. They're not enjoying your company. You're not getting invited to certain places, right? Like, so those are minor. Those are like little tiny things, but that's the reality of the world that we live in. And so the closer I am to Christ, sometimes the further I am away from a lot of the things in this world. And then sometimes it ostracizes me in certain ways, in certain groups, because I can't, there are some things that I just can't do, right? There are some movies I can't go to. There are some things that I can't say, conversations I can't have. And so it's separating, right? So not joining in with the rest of the world is separating. And so he's just warning Isaiah. And for Isaiah, it's a lot bigger, right? It's more of like a life sentence. And so he's warning them, and he said, the Lord Almighty is the one you're to regard as holy, right? He will be the holy place for everybody. He's going to be the rock for any of them. And he says, and for the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare, and many of them are going to stumble. So although he's with you and he is good for you, that's going to make it a trap and a snare to a lot of the people who aren't following him and listening to him. And it says, bind up this testimony of warning and seal up God's instruction among my disciples. So tell people that love the Lord and that are following the Lord, and bind that up with them. And he says, I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the descendants of Jacob. Verse 18 says, here am I and the children of the Lord, here am I and the children the Lord has given me. We are signs and symbols in Israel from the Lord Almighty. So Isaiah is telling everybody that. Moving on to chapter 9, it says, nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. So we're getting a little bit of hope. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee. So this is what is coming. Destruction is going to come, and then something good is going to happen. And it's going to come from Galilee, right? There's going to be honor among Galilee because of this. Verse 2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. So right now it seems terrible. And again, here we go, future and then more future after that. So these people that are in darkness, that have been destroyed, right? They're going to see a light. And this goes all the way back to the time of Genesis. If you remember, he separated light and dark, right? So like this is Genesis 1, back in the beginning. And so they're going to see light. That is great. A light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation. They rejoice before you as people rejoice as the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. That's the stuff that like they did, the people of old kind of rejoiced in this way. Going down to verse 6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. Us is the Israelite nation. So a child is going to be born. It's going to be a son. I think this is the light that he's talking about, right? So this son is going to be the light that's coming. And he's going to be a wonderful counselor, which is great. Like, I think that's nice, but I think that's what they call God. And he's going to be mighty God. This son that is born is going to be the light, and he's going to be mighty God. Do you understand? It's going to be a human son, and it's also going to be mighty God. This is the way I'm looking at it, right? If I'm an Israelite, this is what I'm looking at. He's going to be all these things. He's going to be everlasting Father, and he's going to be a Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne. So he's going to be a descendant of David, which is in the line of Judah, right? So he's going to be on David's throne, and he's going to rule over David's kingdom. All 12 tribes of Israel, all of these people. So if you're looking at this prophecy, this is what's to come in your future. So if you are someone of Israel before the mass destruction of Assyria, right? These people like Isaiah and his disciples that are following, this is what they know to look forward to after destruction, which probably they're not going to be alive for, by the way. And then it says the Lord's going to send anger against Israel. So going through 9, there's going to be so much mass destruction. And it says several times, so this is going to be destroyed. And he said, yet for all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised, so it's not enough. And then he goes on and on. It says the Lord will cut off from Israel both head and tail. So he's going to cut off, it looks like all the elders, right? So like all the government type stuff, and then all of the church type stuff, right? Because if you remember, Israel is enmeshed with both church and state. I hate to even say it that way, but it's all interlocked. It's all together, unlike how we are in the United States. So all of it is going to be cut off. And then in verse 16, those who guide this people mislead them. Be careful of being misled. And those who are guided are led astray. So the leaders are terrible, and then the ones following are terrible because they're just allowing themselves to be led astray, and then the leaders are leading them astray. It says, therefore the Lord will take no pleasure in the young men, nor will he pity the fatherless and the widows. For everyone is ungodly and wicked. Every mouth speaks folly. I want to note this because it says everyone and everyone. And yet, Isaiah and his disciples, I don't believe he's talking about. The Bible is literal. I want to be clear. The Bible is literal. Every word is important, but we use words in a certain way. And so I believe when it says everyone here is ungodly and wicked, he's not talking about a literal everyone, but he's talking about a very general everyone. Because by the way, he's also punishing a very general everyone. Isaiah is not going to be free of the punishment that's coming down on Israel, right? So it's coming down to everyone, even though that small remnant that follows the Lord. So he's saying everyone is wicked. And then for all of that, it says his anger isn't turned away, it's still upraised. So he's going to keep doing more. Wickedness burns like fire. So everything's going to be consumed, right? Verse 21, it says Manasseh is going to feed on Ephraim and their brothers, right? So this is why it's important. Manasseh is going to feed on Ephraim, and Ephraim is going to feed on Manasseh. And then together they're going to turn against Judah. So they're all like back at each other. So these brothers are going to turn on each other, and then collectively they're going to turn on Judah, and everyone's going to be in this massive war with each other. Yet for all this, his anger isn't turned away, right? His hand is still upraised. Woe to those who make bad laws, making widows their prey. So just explaining all of the dirtiness that Israel is doing. And then again, he follows up, and for all of this, his anger is not turned away, and his hand is still upraised. He's not done with their destruction yet. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger. We're now in chapter 10. Assyria is going to be the ones that that punish the nation of Israel, right? So the Assyrians are going to be the ones that come in, and we've seen them slowly, right? In the book of the Kings, we've seen them slowly start to chip away at nations in Israel, right? They're chipping away a little bit at Judah. Judah's had to pay him off a couple of times to keep him away. And so we've seen slowly but surely he's allowing Assyria to be the one that punishes his people. He's allowing that to happen on earth. However, it says, I sent Assyria to punish him, but Assyria is going too far, right? Like they're sent there to seize, loot, and to snatch plunder, and they're trampling them down like mud in the streets. This is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, right? So Assyria is like God's like, I want a punishment on them, but you are going in and you're trying to destroy them. So I'm coming back for you. You're not going to get out of this free and clear. So it says, as my hand sees the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excelled those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? So Judah is also not going to be free and clear of this. So it says, when the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes. So here we go. This is what's going to happen with Assyria. Verse 13, for he says, by the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding. So the king of Assyria is like, I'm so great. I'm knocking out. Look how strong I am. I'm able to take out all of Assyria and take all of their stuff and to make their people slaves and to put them into my culture, right? Like so this is all that Assyria is doing. Assyria is massively destroying them until essentially they get to a point where we're going to find like they don't have food, right? It's going to be really bad. And so the king is so proud of himself because he's thinking he's doing it on his own. But the truth of the matter is God lifted him up to be able to do this. He couldn't do anything without the power of God. So we move on to this chapter. It says, he says in verse 15, as if a rod were to wield the person who lifts it up, or a club brandish the one who's not wood. So he's like, you're my weapon. Like a club can't do it on its own. You actually have to pick it up and you have to start hitting somebody with it. And Assyria, you're my club. You're what I'm using in order to punish my people. And he says, therefore the Lord Almighty will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors until his pomp a fire will be kindled. And then it says in verse 17, the light of Israel will become a fire, their Holy One a flame. So there is going to be a time where Assyria is going to get punished for all their misdeeds against Israel and Judah. And then Israel and Judah are going to be lifted back up again. Verse 20, in that day, the remnant, the small portion of Israel, the survivors of Jacob, will no longer rely on Assyria, who struck them down, but will rely on the Lord. They're going to go through a time where they're still not going to be with the Lord. So even after all this punishment and stuff like that, they're still not going to depend on him. They don't get this full understanding yet, but there's going to come a time where they are. And they're going to turn their eyes and their sights back to the Lord. So have hope. And like I feel like he's saying to Isaiah, there is hope. You, just like he said back to Elijah way back when, you are not alone. There are still people who love the Lord, right? And they're still, eventually I'm going to let them turn back to me. And it's in that time, verse 15, the Lord will dry up the Gulf of the Egyptian Sea. So he's doing a really big visual. So in that time when everyone starts to turn themselves back to the Lord, he's going to dry everything up, and essentially they're going to cross on dry ground, just like he did back in Egypt. So he's making this visual for them, reminding them of what he did, right? So he's reminding Isaiah, remember I did this way back when, right? I did this for my people, and I'm going to do this again. They need a time out, unfortunately a time of punishment, but then I'm going to dry this back up for them, and I'm going to lead them back into Israel, back into relationship with me, right? And I'm going to send them someone. So that is where we're finishing off today. This was a tough one. Isaiah, I mean, you know, I say this because that's me, right? Like you guys might be like, prophecy, I got all that. You didn't even need to say anything. You might have harder times with the chapters in the Kings. But these are harder topics for me to understand and to see. And I know we hear all the time, like, oh, all these prophecies were all fulfilled, and that's amazing. Now hopefully we're starting to get at least for me, I know I'm starting to get an understanding of where they're coming from, who, when, why, where, what they actually heard. And then does that translate into what we see in the future? And I'm hoping we're going to find the way in which the prophecies come true in the future. Like we'll see what that looks like. That's where we're ending for today. I hope you stuck with me. And I know it's long, and I know there's a lot of information in there, but I hope, as always, I hope you guys are reading. That's always my first goal for you, is to read. And then if you can listen and join along in, I love that as well. And then if you want to share comments, I appreciate comments and I try to comment back if at all possible. So if you like this and this was a blessing to you, please like the video, please share with other people, please subscribe to the channel and keep reading in the meantime. Come back and see me tomorrow.